Good morning, and thank you so much for joining me. My name is Sam Hayes. I'm One Stop Transaction Services. I have been a transaction coordinator for about 20 years now. I'm a licensed realtor, a car certified forms trainer, CTC, and basically I really do love this stuff. As we get started this morning, I want to say thank you so much for joining me. I also want to let you know that a couple of things. One, I'm getting over a cold, so I apologize. I will be sucking on Ricolas through this. Two, please verify everything I tell you with your broker of record of the file you are working on. I'm sharing from my perspective administratively and what I've done research on. Anything else, though, specific to your transaction, always verify with the broker. I'm going to stop at the end of each slide to ask if there are any questions. Please feel free to speak up. I do talk fast and can be a lot, so I know this is going to be a lot of information. That's why we're recording it. And my little shameless plug that if you or your brokerage or your affiliates need any topic, anytime, give me a call. This is a complimentary service. I'm happy to talk about this stuff. Truly, I nerd out on it and love it. There's all my fun backup. So here's what we're going to start with. All of this has actually been going on since 2019, but COVID hit and things kind of got pushed on the wayside. It became a little bit not a priority. This was actually supposed to go to court last spring. That's why we had the new forms and all the updates in October and December. There was a stay, and then the court case started in October instead. There was a delay due to, they were questioning about arbitration mediation of the listing agreements that were signed and how it should have been processed that way. Right now, we have had a verdict come in, but not final approval. The judge will be doing that on November 20th. That's Judge Burroughs. What came down was there were two settlements ahead where we had Remax and Anywhere. And this is kind of a very general outline of their settlements. They settled for we'll put M there, millions of dollars when they settled in September. Right now, the verdict that came down is $1.785 billion. However, because it was an antitrust lawsuit, they get 3 times. So that puts it at $5.4 billion. I understand it is being appealed. Everybody wants to appeal. The thing is to remember, you have to put up a bond to appeal. And that bond has to be at least 10% of that. So that's 500, or I'm going to screw up the numbers, but that's a huge sum of money for NAR and everybody else to be able to put up into a bond to start these appeals. One of the big things about all of this that's going on is you have to remember that DOJ is floating around in the background. DOJ was in the court. DOJ has gotten involved on several of the feedback on the settlement. And right now, I hope there's still negotiations going on, because the more that we can get settled and sorted now, as you've seen, there are multiple copycat lawsuits that have already started, including a buyer side, which we'll go into on one of the later slides. It's even bigger and is nationally based, where they've included anybody who participated in the MLS since 1996. The thing to take into account with this, regardless of what happens, if the cases get appealed or not, as you can see in these two settlements, right here, the fact that they don't have to join NAR anymore for both of them, that's part of the settlement terms for both, where Redfin is requiring them not to join. It's no longer a requirement for Anywhere and Remax if these settlements get approved. The other thing is that it needs to be seen that they now have to educate their clients with new disclosures and new training policies regarding the that commissions can be negotiated, that there's no requirement to pay the commission for the buyer side or the other side, and there needs to be way more education. So I would expect to see a lot more broker-specific disclosures coming forward. We're going to want to use the NSF, that's the notice of what is something for our non-statutory forms. And what that is basically discloses to your clients that if your broker decides to approve for those broker-specific forms to be signed, you've disclosed that they should seek legal counsel and that you can't advise on them because they are not under the same umbrella and vetting that the car forms are. Something to keep in mind. Basically, this is going to be a lot more paperwork, is the bottom line, is where all this falls out to. Does anybody have any questions on this slide? Okay. So then we're going into the rest of this. Now, the bigger thing also is Judge Burroughs has been assigned to the second case. That's the Gibson case. So what's happening is he is currently deciding on the one that has the verdict. That was the one that came down on Halloween. That's our 5.4 billion. Then on Halloween, as soon as they got the verdict, the same lawyer filed another case, and that's the Gibson case. This is now including Compass, EXP, Redfin, pulling in all these other names to it. This one has expected to be $200 billion. This is the judge is now going to sit on both cases. I don't know if that's good or bad. I think it's probably because he has the understanding and all the information. I'm hoping because they're trying to get everybody to do settlements, negotiations, come to the table. We'll see what comes of it. I don't know. The bigger thing is this now includes all realtors. This one and the buyer one will go into. So even if we're not part of one of these, they're now trying to bring the umbrella is getting bigger and bigger and bigger every time one of these copycats comes up. And the problem is, even though people think, well, it was filed in Missouri, or the buyer one that was filed in Illinois, they were filed in federal courts. So the fact that they were filed at federal courts will have an impact on all of us. And especially with these settlements, because these are national companies, we're gonna see this coming into our files much sooner than I think anybody understands. Going with that, so we have the copycat lawsuit. That one's now trying to figure out where that's going to be coming from. Timeframes on that are not up to date. The other thing that plays into all of this is then there was the Massachusetts MLS, the MLS PIN. They've already settled for $3 million, and they've already changed their rule for buyer compensation. New York has already changed their rule for buyer compensation. A lot of people are just kind of doing it to get ahead of this and try and be away from any more court cases, legal fees, all those type of things. It's changing daily. I mean, it was almost changing hourly when I was watching everything last week as the court cases were coming up. DOJ is using that as an example and what they're expecting. So that's why I would expect, I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I did. My gut says before the end of the year or by early next year, we're going to see buyer compensation may be removed from the MLS. I am not an expert in this. I don't know that for sure, but reading the information and seeing where things are going, that seems like the best risk management choice to do. So with that, that's part of why we're talking today about these forms. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. So then the buyer side lawsuit is the Batten 1 and Batten 2. Right now I'm still getting more information about it, but that's that one that's going to be huge. That's the one that they're expecting it to be nationwide. They're including everybody since 1996. And now the buyer side saying, well, we had to pay too much money, or we didn't know about this. And we already have decided, well, the seller side got taken. So who lost money? That's where it's coming down to, is you're saying this happened, but it's basically everybody going, we want money and we shouldn't have had to pay so much. And they're not quite understanding what all happened and what goes into a transaction, which is why moving forward, you're going to use the buyer broker or buyer representation broker compensation. So what is all this? We haven't had to use a lot of this for many years because the market was hot. Everything was crazy. It's been going well. There was really not an issue. And a lot of people didn't like using a buyer broker. They didn't like the idea of the locking down and the connecting. I've been in the industry for 20 years. And so I remember when I used to help agents put together buyer representations and all sorts of packets. And you would go and actually kind of interview to work with buyers. We're switching back to a bit of that mentality. Plus, it's really good just to educate your client about the process. We kind of get numb to it as agents because, and TCs and anybody who's in the industry, we do this every day. This is all we do. This is what we look at all the time. We're like, of course, it's no big deal. Well, this is a very big deal to somebody who's only done this once, twice, or never before. And this could be the biggest purchase of their life. They could be the first one in their family to purchase a home. They may be under pressure because of buying a home because there was a death, a birth, movement. There's all sorts of other things to take into account. So stepping back and realizing, hey, we need to walk them through this process as those knowledge individuals and experts are there to be of service to our clients. It helps get in a perspective where this isn't an adversarial situation. This is just a communication of, hey, this is how it goes. Let me show you and let me walk you through it. So with all that being said, the form was combined last October, released in December. We had 3 different versions. We're now into 1. It defaults into non-exclusive. That's something to pay attention to because non-exclusive, that's more you're going to have to prove that you did do the showing of the property, that you were there, that you did do the offer if there becomes an issue for compensation. It has a start date. Then you go to a number of days that you're going to be working with somebody. These are both very important things because without them, you don't have an actual enforceable document, which means if there becomes an issue, I can't help try and make sure you get compensation. It's an obligation for compensation. It may not be from the buyer, but they are obligated to find out a way to get you compensated. And right now, I know of too many agents who unfortunately have put too many people in the car, driven around, and suddenly they've gone and either written the offer with the listing agent. It's been a new construction that they're no longer offering compensation, even though all they're old school, you've walked them in and done everything, have been there. I want to make sure you're taken care of. You're all working way too hard to not be able to be reimbursed for your efforts. Let's see. This is cancelable by either party. If you're non-exclusive, it's immediate. We're done. We're no longer connected. If you're exclusive, it is a 30-day window. It defines the broker and buyer tasks and duties. It limits your scope of services. It says you're not going to go climb on the roof. You're not going to be climbing under the house and checking things out. It outlines both your duties for the buyer and for the agent, what you're each responsible to bring to the relationship, and what information, documentation, and responsibilities you have. You can do it for a property. You can do it for a day. You can do it for a zip code, a county, a city. You can do it for a price amount. You can do all sorts of things. What is great about it is it can be very specific or it can be a very broad form. And if you have a challenge with a client who doesn't want to sign one, you can let them know, hey, we'll just do it this one time for this one property. And then you do it for the next property. And at some point, maybe you can get it for a week, or maybe we can get it for a month. The more they see that you're going to do this for every property, and if they're concerned about the being too much, you can get very specific and just use it each time. But right now it is not required to be used. It's not a CAR or NAR requirement. You will need to verify with your broker of record if it is. I am going to say from a risk management standpoint, there's a lot of benefits to it. And the more comfortable you are with the form, the more you can see sharing your value. I really highly encourage the use of it, but I'm a forms nerd and I know these all exist for a reason, so I like to use them. Anybody have any questions? Okay.
I have one, Sam, really quick. So you're kind of saying that we could use this one in replace of the current one, or should we kind of use them together?
This is the only one. This is now the only one that exists. They combined everything down to they put everything. So you just have to fill in the specifics like exclusive, not exclusive on this one.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
No worries. Okay. So we're going to get into the mind numbing part and specifics and all the fun stuff. Looking at the form, this is where you have your start date. You're going to say the buyer's name. You're going to say your brokerage. How many days? It ends at 11:59 p.m. or upon completion of the resulting transaction. We clarify, do they have any pre-existing buyer representation? Say they're buying the neighbor's house and they promise their sister can represent them. Do they have any agreements or anything that it's tailing off and they don't want to work with that individual anymore? You can outline that here. Your property to be acquired, like we talked about, location, cities, price range, counties, other. Only purple houses on a left-hand side street. You can get it, again, you can get very, very specific. You can get it very, very broad. It's kind of a Goldilocks thing, though. You want to get just right so that you're protected and it's not too gray of an area if it had to go to court. Compensation to the broker. It can be a percentage. It can be a fee. It can be a flat amount. Your brokerage may establish a schedule saying, okay, this is what we do, and you can attach that schedule with them, that it's a sliding scale. That's really going to be up to you and your broker and what they do. You also can, this meets RESPA requirements. If you're going to have the transaction coordinator fee paid, this is where you would disclose it as well, because everything needs to be disclosed prior to going under contract to meet RESPA. Broker involvement. Is it non-exclusive? This is that whole situation there where if you physically entered and shown the property, you showed it virtually or submitted the offer, even though it's not exclusive, you have your procuring cause. This is where it's stating that you have been the one working with them. Is it just exclusive? This box is going to be your best friend, because right there, we want to make sure that everybody knows it's an exclusive arrangement, and similar to a listing agreement where you have, your 180 days. If you were to cancel, you give the list of the properties you've shown that you would have, that you'd be owed a commission if any of those had gone under contract at a later date. Any questions? Okay. Oops. Wrong box. Cancellation of representation, just like we do with cancellation of a listing, cancellation of a contract, there's a specific form for it. You're going to outline that you can set up here how many days after receipt when you give the notice. You can give a bit of a buffer. You can go ahead and say it's 30 days. You can extend it to 60. That's going to be a conversation with your broker and how much time and the relationship with that client. You have to give them within 5 days a list, and there is a form for that as well, stating all the properties you showed them, what dates, and all of that. It's basically a lot more documentation and a lot more follow-up than we've been before. It's been a little bit easier, but you might have miscellaneous MLSs, texts, and things like that. Now is a really great time to start planning. How are you going to organize this? How are you going to set this up so that you can track everything? Because it is more of being able to prove if there becomes an issue. And unfortunately, as we know, when the economy is a little bit more challenging, things can get a little grayer. So it's always good to be as clear as possible and have as much documented as possible. Accounting for payment to the broker by others. So how are we going to do that? What are we going to do if, let's say you have negotiated this buyer broker agreement at 2.5, and then the other side doesn't have it in the MLS, but the seller has decided they're going to offer 3%. Well, who gets that overage of that 0.5%? Do you get to keep that? Because it's more than you've already negotiated here. Do you credit that back to the buyer? This is where you're going to do some of that clarification of who gets that excess amount. And you're going to want to pay attention to that, because it's going to be interesting, since we don't know how things are going to play out. This is something to be aware of and start thinking in the back of your head, because there may be some wins to this, but how is that going to be handled, and how to make sure you mitigate and explain things to clients? Because as we know, when money's online, sometimes our brains go out the window and emotions override. So the more you haven't clarified and written down ahead of time, the better off you'll be. Additional right to compensation. If they enter into a contract on any of the properties listed on that notice of broker involved properties, when's the time frame? When would you be owed that? This is similar to on page 1 of the RLA, where a lot of times you see 180 days. That's going to be something you're going to negotiate with the client, and also talk to your broker about what the brokerage expects. Anybody have any questions? I know it's really fun stuff. It's mind numbing, but it's important. Okay, page 2, anticipated payment of the broker by others. So we'll get into this form as well. We now need to document, if it's listed in the MLS, where did they offer 0? Did they offer 1? Did they offer 2? Did they offer 3? Or in any communications you receive, depending on what becomes the norm once all these lawsuits sort out. The biggest issue on everything has been that they didn't feel that they being the clients, the buyers and sellers, did not feel that they were disclosed the compensation that was being given to the agents. Unfortunately, there was a trend of some agents to say, well, I work for you for free because the seller's paying for me. And that's one of the issues they're challenging, is because they feel that there was price fixing. That's why we're in an antitrust situation, that everybody colluded. Again, we all know the reality. We know how much is disclosed. We know how much clarification goes on. But that's why it's so important to get it in writing, to make sure when people have these moments of saying, well, you didn't tell me, I'd rather be able to say, we told you here, 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 and here. I'm all about redundancy, as you all know, on any file I've worked on. I am the paperwork queen. So with this, you have a couple of options. The ABCD, which, yes, I love that Carr has me saying such funny things. The anticipated broker compensation disclosure, and that form we'll get into, lists out all the things of which property you showed them, how much commission, and all of that. You can also use the MLSs. But the bigger part of this, and you'll need to verify with your broker of record, are you going to do it before you show them the property to let them know what your compensation is, or are you going to do it before you write the offer? With what's happened and the feedback from the lawsuits, my risk management brain suggests that I would say, mark this box here, that it's going to be prior to showing the property, because then it's full disclosure for the largest amount of time prior to anything happening. Again, that's going to be a brokerage call. Then you're going to go into your timing of your compensation. When will you be paid? Typically, it'll be through escrow, but maybe you have a different arrangement. Pre-existing buyer representation and compensation, clarifying if there's anything along those lines. They have to let you know. They have to communicate with the other broker that they're now working with you, they being the buyer. Also, you're not required to represent or owe no compensation if is already a pre-existing situation. So what you're going to want to do is make sure you're having those questions, asking those questions, going with your gut. Oh, we saw that property. Well, who showed you that property? Do you have an agency? Do you have a relationship? Do you have documentation with them that you owe them compensation? You're going to need to be having a lot more clear conversations with your clients. I would suggest before you put them in the car, but up to you and how you want to do things. The agency relationships, just like with the listing agreement, the contract, I didn't include them, but as we all know, you get the agency disclosure, the PRBS, the fair housing, and the wire fraud, as well as the consumer protection. So, excuse me, you're going to have a lot of forms with this. We're going to have duplicates of these forms. They're going to re-sign them when they write the offer. I would keep all the forms together at all times. So if you sign the agency and everything else with the BRBC, keep that pile. And then when you sign again with the contract, keep that pile. DocuSign, it's just a few clicks and it shows a cleaner path. And if we get audited in the file, we have proof that they were told here and then told again here once you went under offer. That would be best practice, but again, verify with your broker of record. This goes into the broker's obligations and what they are responsible for. Big note here, a lot of people, the agent's visual is a civil code action. The action itself, the use of the AVID is not civil code required. It was created as a tool to prove you did your civil code action of completing your physical inspection of the property, don't go on the roof, all of that fun stuff. This states you will actually do it. So if it's something that you have not done in the front end of any of your transactions, I know how my agents love their AVIDs. We're going to want to make sure that you are doing them as soon as possible, especially if you're going under escrow. I would start keeping one set up on your DocuSign. We can set one up in Glide that you have that you can just do as a general property, and we can add in the address. There's a lot of ways to do this. We can simplify it. Let me know. It's a quick thing to set up, but just be ready. Your AVID, you're going to want to be doing much sooner than typically have done previously if you have one of these in place. It also states that any of the disclosures that you receive for the transaction have not been verified and will not be verified by the broker, that we can't say yes or no. We'll go through and ask questions and everything else, but we can't say if the seller has lied or has not shared all the information or unfortunately been naughty and done something fraudulent. It also states that we will follow with all anti-discrimination compliance laws throughout the state of California, city of San Diego, or whichever city you're working with. City, county in the state. Any questions? I know it's fun stuff. It's really fun stuff. I like it though, because I like that there's a tool and I like that things are clarified. And it's important to me that to go the mind-numbing bits so you know those little trip ups. Like, what if you didn't know you have to do an AVID and your broker didn't require one? And then somehow some lawyer and things went down the hill. So I like to make sure you know where the little speed bumps could be within a document. Here are the buyer's obligations. They've got to tell you within 5 days. Can they provide? Like, can they actually buy the house? Do they have proof of funds? Do they have a pre-approval? Is it current? Last time I went to one of the caravans, one of the lenders suggested with how much has changed. I mean, hey, this week we had the biggest drop in a year, that whole, 2025 on lending. You never know what could change. So you're going to want to make sure your pre-approval letters are getting updated at least every 2 weeks, maybe even weekly, depending on what could be happening coming up. Is there any material issue? Do they have anything that they have to have? Do they have to have a single story? Do they not want to see any pools? Do they need a yard for the dog? Who knows? This is where you can go into and use the BMI, the buyer material issues, that form to clarify ahead of time if they bring up anything that's specific so that you have that documented and that you did ask them. If they don't provide correct information, that they have to make sure that you're now indemnified and harmless if they lied to you. Say they, if they give you fraudulent bank statements, unfortunately, shenanigans happen. This protects the brokerage. Then it goes into attorney's fees, dispute resolution, mediation, all of that fun stuff, the typical. Any questions? Okay. Mediation terms, as we discussed, then it goes into addendums and advisories. I would suggest including the market condition advisory here because it does state a challenge I know with this market where I've had buyers have one offer in and then write another offer, but they don't have the funds to buy both properties. the market condition advisory puts into writing that that is acting in against good faith, and that could be a situation where if both those listing agents and sellers find out, they could demand that buyer buy both those properties. So there's a lot of liability with that. The other thing that's great, I'm seeing a lot of people waive appraisals or different parts of contingencies. The market condition advisory addresses that about writing a non-contingent offer, and also that offers are not confidential. You may have some affiliated documents with your brokerage. Your brokerage may be one of the ones creating new documentation with everything that's going on that they want required. This is a place that I would include that. You also then other terms, again, as we talked before, if your brokerage has an admin fee, document storage fee, I'm seeing TC fee, this is where you can clarify everything out. So this is going to be a little cul-de-sac, and those who have worked on files with me know I'm a diehard for making sure you have proof if you're signing on the behalf of an entity. So this states that within 3 days of signing, similar to what's in RPA 28, they must provide you with proof of signing authority. We're talking about, I need a copy of a valid power of attorney. We need in the trust, there are 2 different pages. It can be the trust certification, declaration, in the LLCs, there are other documentation. I need something from a third party showing that they have signing authority. It's to protect you. There's a lot of fraud going on right now. We want to make sure this is a valid buyer and that they have the authority. There isn't somebody that they're not telling that they're buying property on behalf of this entity. So we'd fill all that fun stuff out here. And then, yay, you got Form 1 done. Any questions? I know, it's very exciting.
Sam?
Yes.
I've spoken to other agents as we're going through this the last few weeks, and a lot of them believe that this BRBC form is either not enforceable or will not be enforced or cannot be enforced because it's too much to have a broker or anybody go back and sort through. What are your thoughts on that?
I think anybody's going to fight stuff, and I think every single thing can be challenged. I do believe in the benefits of why we have CAR and the CAR forms, that we have lawyers going through this. Do I think this form is going to be revised at least once, if not twice, in the next 6 months? 100%. Is anything, if you've got a good lawyer, unenforceable? 100%. That's part of why I'm pointing out all the little pitfalls and little holes, because the more that you can stack up that you did it to the best of your ability and showed communication of what the intent was, I think the better off you're going to be. But I also think there are a lot of people that don't like the idea of change. And I think there are a lot of old school agents or new school agents who haven't educated themselves on and tried to understand the why behind it, that are going to be pissed off and don't want to do more paperwork. This is like PEDS all over again, where I don't have to do this and you can't make me do this. And it's the same type of thing where we're asking people to do extra work, it seems. But if you step back and think about it, the more it's clarifying communication, in the long run, it's less. I think it's going to lead to easier transactions in some ways, because everything's being, expectations are being set up and established in the front end. But that's my thoughts. I'm not a lawyer. You need to verify with broker of record to be very specific to each transaction. Does that answer your question?
Very well, thank you.
Okay, awesome. Okay, buyer transactional advisory, similar to the BIA in your contract, outlines the buyer obligations, outlines agent's duties and limitations, also states that you're allowed to represent both sides. So you may have a buyer and then you get a listing and you want to match them both up. This is letting them know ahead of time you're allowed to do that in the state of California. Currently, that could change too. If you listen to all the rumblings and everything else, everything's up in the air right now. So everything I'm telling you right now could change tomorrow. But based on what I know, that's where we're at. Okay. So this is that fun form I was telling you about, the ABCD. So what you're doing here is you're outlining, saying that they're acknowledging that you have told them that you're going to anticipate this compensation from the other side. It may be a different amount than what you have negotiated with them to be responsible for paying. You go through and fill this out every single time. You either make the offer. Well, this one has the first time when you show it to them. And then also when you write the offer, the amount of compensation, how was the compensation offered? Is it in the MLS? Is it a cooperating broker compensation? Was it a negotiation? Which part of it? Once your final compensation is done, once you've gone under contract, then this portion would be filled out so that they understand how much. And then the buyer will also initial at the bottom of the page. This buyer initials at the bottom of the page is going to be a lot. And I would make sure you get that done as soon as possible because they will trip you up on it. So here, go back. Go back. So much fun with toys. So I think that's going to be one we're going to have an issue where this is a lot of file auditors are going to be kicking this back for that buyer's initials. So keep an eye on that. The other thing you can do is have them sign an MLS every single time you show them a property. If you can't, as I've told on other presentations, like let me know, hey, Sam, we showed blah, 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 blah properties today. And we have them initialed. I can send them in DocuSign while you're out in the field. Or I would go old school. You can print them out. You can pre-program in your DocuSign and have them sign when you're at the properties. There's a lot of ways to do this. I think I would prefer the MLSs just because then there's no question of where the information came from. There's no chance for human error of typos. And then they're seeing all the information at once. It's all, there's a picture of the photo or a photo of the property. There's the address. There's the information about the property. It's not, oh, I didn't remember it was that one. Oh, I didn't realize it was that property. There's not, it mitigates a lot of the gray. Those you would just stack up behind it. We turn this all in. I'm already seeing a couple brokerages have their own version of this that they're starting to use. It's almost the same verbatim verbiage of this and taking pieces from the other forms that we have. Again, this is one I expect with what's going down, each individual brokerage most likely will be meeting with their own legal teams and having their own version or what their requirements are. Any of these documents I'm showing you right now, are you required to use right now? Not that I'm aware of. Will your broker require you to use? You need to verify that with the broker you're working with. Things are changing very quickly. They may not have made a decision. You could also expect, hey, starting after Thanksgiving, all of this is required. We don't know. And a lot of it too, they're not, like I said, the judge is not making the final call on the current case. That would be on the Sitzer-Burnett case till the 20th. And that, if he does the injunctive action, could put a lot of this in play very quickly. Any questions? Okay. So we've done all this. We've done all the showing. We've done everything. The MLS has gone away, or the bar record compensation has gone away. How do we ask the seller to pay you? So we have the seller payment to buyer's broker. One, you've got to have your buyer broker representation signed prior, because you're going to have to present a copy with the offer and with this document. You cannot ask for more that's in the buyer broker agreement. So you can't suddenly go, these buyers have made me crazy, I now want 5%. That's not how this works. You only can ask for the max of what you've got in the buyer broker agreement. And if some reason the seller is offering somewhere 7% and you have 2.5%, I now want to get 9%. No, that's not how it works. You either get whichever you have in the buyer broker. So that's one of the challenges of the buyer broker agreement, that it can be limiting. Like some people are like, well, I'll just put what's in the MLS. Well, what if nothing's in the MLS? Well, I'll just put whatever seller's offering. Well, what if seller's not offering anything? You want to make sure you put a ceiling and a floor. Similar to, as I know, when we've gone in to have investigations or you're negotiating requests for repairs or home warranties, make sure you're thinking that through, that you've given yourself some wiggle room, but also some protection when you set the other up. So what you'll do is you'll go through this and you basically say, okay, I have a compensation at 2.5 or checked for the dollar amount. I'm asking you to pay this and it won't be greater to, and then you go into all of your numbers like we talked about. And then you submit this all together. Say, I have this amazing buyer for you, Mr. Seller or Mrs. Seller, and we're going to go ahead. And I'd also like you to pay the commission, and you package it up. And yes, there are going to be other trainings, and yes, there's going to be other things. And I know there'll be different tricks, and we're all going to get more comfortable with this. But I would start doing some scripting, and I would start doing some practices with different agents, or how you might have done some negotiations before, because all of our negotiation skills are going to come into a lot of play in the next year. I'd highly suggest taking I'm a big YouTube University fan, so I would take any of the different classes. I think it's Black Swan about Don't Split the Difference, that he was a FBI negotiator, that I highly recommend following him. And I'm a big, I watch BAMX and all the other guys that are out there. So it's stuff you may want to be honing up on those skills in a little bit. And that's the last form. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, let me see what's in the chat here. What if okay. What if the day after the buyer decided to pay the agent commission and the fee? I would probably do an addendum to your buyer broker agreement, or you do an addendum if you've already negotiated in the contract to the contract itself. We're gonna have to find out what the lenders are gonna want to see. I don't know how that's gonna be handled, since right now agents aren't party of the contract, so commissions are not party of the contract. And now we're kind of bringing that in because we're asking the seller to pay the buyer's agent's commission. So to me, if you're changing the terms of that, I would typically probably have escrow do an update. And then right now we don't really have you could do a modification of terms, since there's not, it wouldn't be an addendum because the addendum's for the buyer and seller. So I'd probably do the modification of terms, change it to buyer, and then have that signed up and then present everything to escrow is how I'd handle that one. Okay, let's see what else we got. Oops. No, oh, you didn't have a BRBC prior, then that could get messy. That would be one I would check with the broker, check with escrow, how we have to document it. But if they're suddenly paying it, you're changing, that's also a credit, then the buyer is typically not a credit, but another payment. So you're also want to check with the lender, how do they want to document it? I'm not quite sure how you would do that one yet. That would be really specific. Any other questions? Okay. Let's see. What else can I tell you? I'm going to be trying to do a couple of these every 2 weeks. My next one's going to be on how to do a buyer representation presentation. I used to do them with some of my agents, so I have some templates I was going to put out there. I know a lot of people are rusty on them. As much as this keeps updating, I will definitely be blasting out to my clients and to all of my vendor associates and putting on my Facebook any updates I can find. Do you have any other questions about just anything else related to forms, documentation, or anything else going on out there? Okay, I must be either that good or that boring. I'm not sure which, but okay. So we'll go with that. I appreciate your time. I will be keeping you as up to date as I can. As soon as I hear if anything's official, I will be jumping in and doing my usual throwing a hissy fit and screaming from the rafters, but feel free to call me anytime with questions. Again, I can present on pretty much any of these type of topics anytime. It's totally complimentary, and thank you so much for being here. I hope you have an amazing weekend.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Sam.